Hey everybody, welcome back. So first thing we're going to do is a little bit of prep work. And what we're going to do is we are going to put our cone and our styrofoam ball together, and we're going to cut our fabric. So I like to make my mess first, get it cleaned up, and then my work area is cleaned because this is going to create quite a bit of mess. So the styrofoam balls that I have chosen, they're pretty easy to cut. I know that you can't see it, but there's actually a line here. These are the smooth styrofoam balls. There's a line here so that I'll be able to cut straight around it. So I just cut along that line. Getting this as smooth and straight as possible is pretty important to how it is going to set on our cone. Now, if you get the other styrofoam, it actually cuts a little bit easier. Now, I do have an actual styrofoam cutter, but with this kind of styrofoam that I'm using, it doesn't work as well. It melts it more than it cuts it. So I'm just going to take my time. That way it comes out as smooth as possible. And that'll create less work for me in the long run. So here's kind of where the work starts. So we're not done with our knife yet. So I want to put my bottom and my top together. I'm going to take my hot glue, and it's on low temp. And I'm going to be very liberal. And I'm going to be very careful to not get close to the edge because you don't want your hot glue seeping out. So I'm going to line that up there as good as I can to center it. And before you go on to the next step, you're going to want to make sure that this is good and cool because you don't want this sliding around while you're trying to cut the excess off. So the reason that we're doing this and adding this on is so we have a smooth, rounded look. Using the top part of the cone without this, it doesn't look as finished. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to go around the edge. And the way that I'm doing it, I'm going flush with my cone to make my cut. So I'm cutting down slowly till I get to the side of the cone. And I'm being very careful to cut along the edge of the cone and not into the cone itself. And my hot glue wasn't cool. And it's flying around, y'all. But that's okay. I'm just going to hold it there with my hand and keep going. So now you know why it's important to wait for that hot glue to cool down. Okay, so now that we've cut that little bit of excess off that was overhanging, and you kind of want to be, careful and don't cut too much off. and you don't want to take the roundness of your ball. So now we're going to kind of file it down and smooth it out and round it out. So that's where the file comes in. That came in the file kit that you get for the file kit. Now you can actually carefully do this with sandpaper, but I like because I can smoothly, because it gets a texture of your hand in it, and I can round this better with this file. So I'm pulling and rounding as I go, because you don't want this flat. So I'm rounding around the top of my ball as I go. So around here, you want to kind of flatten it out, make sure it's flush, your cone and your styrofoam ball. And I honestly think this is probably the longest part of this process. But when I got done making the top piece, it was well worth it. So all I'm doing now is kind of pulling and rounding. And just kind of making sure that everything's even. And as you can see, it just comes off real easy with the file, and it makes it look nice and smooth. So now we're ready to cut our fabric. Now I use some pots. Solo cups is what I found if you put it around your house, but you're going to need something so that your ornament balls don't roll all over your table while you're working with them. So here's the fabric that I chose. It's very important when you're picking out your fabric that you pay attention to your pattern and which way your fabric has to go. So basically with your fabric, this is what's called the salvage edge. You're going to need to cut your ornament in that direction. Salvage edge at the bottom. If you question whether or not the fabric has to stretch a little bit, if you get a fabric that's too tight, it won't lay right. So if you just pull, your fabric will stretch, because if you pull it this way, it won't. And you're going to need that stretch of your fabric so that it will lay properly. So when you're looking at your patterns, please keep that in mind. So what I have found the easiest thing to do to cut the ornament balls out is to trace around the edge. So I just take an ink pen and trace. I'll hold it down and trace. And the reason that I found that this is actually the best way to do it is because when I used the paper piece and pinned it on and then cut, it wasn't a true cut, and my pieces ended up being a little bit too big because I didn't want to cut my template. So after I trace that down, I'm going to take some pins and I'm going to pin my fabric so that my layers don't go, because I've got 4 layers of fabric here, so that my layers don't go all over the place and move while I'm cutting. I'm just going to take some pins and I'm going to pin my fabric down in a few places. Now this is a large ornament ball, So I'm going to use a couple more pins. The smaller the ornament ball, of course, you don't have to use as many pins. So I started down here at the bottom because I'm going to have extra. So that way, this is my top. I folded it over at the top. I can cut straight across here, and I'll have a bigger scrap piece. So I'm going to start at the point. And what I'm making sure to do when I'm cutting these is I'm making sure that I cut the ink out. So I'm cutting just to the inside of the ink, because you don't want that ink. Ink will bleed and it will come over your fabric and it will ruin your project. So I'm making sure that when I cut, that I'm cutting the ink off. And that's also going to give you the true pattern size. If you pick a fabric that's darker than this and your ink pen won't show up, just remember to turn your fabric inside out. Got a little bit of ink pen here. So for your big ornament ball, you're going to need a total of 8 of these. 4 of each color that you choose or whatever you want to do, but you're going to need a total of 8. And what I do to get ready to put them on is I'm going to turn them all face up. For the, and this is my red fabric that's going to go with it. We're going to put that face up. For the 8-inch ornament ball, you're going to need 4 of each. And I have my 2 here, my stripe and my dot. For the 6-inch, you're also going to need 8 of each. And for the top piece, you're going to need 3 of each color. So to get ready to put the fabric on, we're going to lay down some wax paper. When you go to put your fabric on, you have to do your lighter one first. Whatever your lighter fabric is, that's the one that has to go on first. The reason is if you hold your fabrics together and you question it, you have to pick up one of these is going to show through. But in this case, this one's such a pattern repeat, I'm going to use my red first. Even though this is lighter, this is just my personal choice, but I'm going to use my red fabric first. So I'm going to set that one aside. For this one, I'm going to use my stripe fabric first. I'm going to set my top one aside. And once again, I'm going to use my plain one first and set this aside. And then my stripe, set it aside. So what you want to do is you're getting your pieces of fabric ready and in place to put them on your ornament ball. So with your Craft Bond Quick Dry, I definitely recommend that you have a container to turn it down in. Just makes it easier because you're going to have to tap it on the table a little bit while you're doing it. Going to need our paintbrush now. So that's all the prep work that you're going to need to do to get ready to go. As soon as y'all are done doing your prep work, come on back, y'all. We're going to start putting our fabric on.